Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment, and it is executed by my institution, SANBI, with partnership of the Department of Water and Sanitation and many other partners, which we're thankful for them coming on board. And this work took place in 2 demonstration catchments, as you can see on the screen. And the aim of the project is, it's a mouthful, but it is to unlock development finance to secure ecological infrastructure for water security in critical water catchments, namely the Berg-Breda catchment, which is in the Western Cape, and that supplies water to the city of Cape Town, as well as the Greater Umgeni catchment, which supplies water to Durban, or the Ethiopian municipality. And what you see at the bottom is like a small infographic there, but it's just to demonstrate the strategies which the project piloted. And there's three of them. One, it is creating an enabling environment through supporting policies, financing mechanisms, and natural capital accounts as one of them. 2, strengthening on the ground of the implementation in the catchments, as well as sharing knowledge that comes through from the project towards mobilizing further activities or actions. The project was designed to address some particular issues. Amongst them is water is managed as a standalone resource, and this we know from our history of where we come from with managing of our water resources, and hence also ignoring the critical role that catchments and ecological infrastructure play in delivering fresh, clean water from the areas where it falls, as well as the insufficient and unreliable data on water and ecosystems, which contributed to poorly informed decisions by policymakers. So the ER for Water project then specifically has set out to integrate ecological and socio-economic data towards planning and finance and the development in the water sector to improve water security, and in doing so support human well-being. The project worked to do so in various ways. But specifically for this project, I'll be focusing on natural capital accounts and how it was used to contribute towards obtaining the aim or the objective of the project. So first of all, NCA requires that we clearly define concepts, our accounting areas, classification systems, and methods so that they can be standardized and so that we can also replicate these accounts. So to be clear about the terms, 1, what is natural capital accounts, or what is natural capital? It is a broad concept that includes things like timber, water, minerals, as well as our ecosystems. Ecological infrastructure is a subset of natural capital and are the naturally functioning ecosystems that generate or deliver valuable services and benefits to all of us as we sit in this room. So ecological infrastructure are the rivers, the wetlands, riparian areas, as well as the strategic water source areas, as they've already been mentioned in our introduction by our introductory speakers, through which and by which water moves downstream to our pipes in our homes, the dams, and other infrastructures. So basically, EI is the stock of assets that provides a flow of our ecosystem services. And this, it is essential to our well-being, as well as biodiversity, as it's already has been mentioned, and the economy. And the ER for Water Security project focuses on drawing on available information to compile a number of accounts that connect water and ecosystems and integrate socio-economic information. And what I'll do, I'll just dive into it and show you how we did this. First up it is our national accounts for strategic water source areas. So what are the strategic water source areas? I mean, I'm sure we're all sitting here and wondering, because it's a term that has been used so often, but can we all relate to that term? So as you can see on the map, these occupy only 8% of South Africa's land area. And that, together with water from Lesotho and Eswatini, provides us with 50% of South Africa's water. Imagine 50%. But what we had to do in these accounts, we only compiled accounts within South African landscape. And these, you can all just acknowledge, these were first of our kind in this country, and they focused only on 22 strategic water source areas for surface water inside South Africa. And the accounts were biophysical and tracked changes in land cover as well as in protected areas within the strategic water source areas over 3 decades. And we use the best available data. As it's already been said, we are data rich. So that is our benefit. So we use the national land cover for 1990, 2014, 2018, and 2020 to create the land accounts. And for the protected areas accounts, that we use the separate data, the South African protected areas data, which was aligned to our national land cover. And both these data sets, we can upload our department that the data comes from, which is the Department of Forestry and Fisheries. These accounts we use to integrate a range of information alongside the statistics that came from the accounts. So what you can see here, sorry. So what you can see here is the population census data. And note that this is information that came from the 2011 census information. Apologies for that. Apologies. So by integrating the population census statistics, this helped us to highlight that while strategic water source areas are crucial for water security downstream, but thousands of people who are within the strategic water source areas still lack water that comes from our taps that we all take for granted and rely mainly on water that comes from our springs, rivers, or streams. Then interestingly, the population inside the strategic water source areas also has a higher density than average in many cases, and this you can see from the graph. What we also see from the accounts for strategic water source areas is that there is a higher intensity of mines, timber, plantations, cultivated areas, as well as built-up areas, and these are found inside the strategic water source areas. And this compared with the average across what is found in the entire South Africa. And, sorry, as well as the fact that protection, as you can see on the map, the map itself, because we can also spatially represent the account spatially, that it has, and that protection within the strategic water source area, although it has improved over the past 30 years, there are some strategic water source areas that are almost without any kind of protection. And these are the kind of information that we need in order to actually have more action and inform our decision makers. And these findings also highlight that urgent efforts are needed across a whole, the entire South Africa towards conservation and protection of our strategic water source areas. And this information also has been used in various ways, and because of its relevance, towards policy making. And currently, it has already been used towards by the government towards prioritization and a subset of the strategic water source areas for more immediate action. And it was also used in a combination with other information to identify measures towards securing strategic water source areas. And this is some of the activities that have been done via our department. And also what SANBI also has done is taken up this information towards municipal support in using the information towards mainstreaming. The project has also developed experimental accounts, and these were also compiled within the 2 demonstration catchments that I've already mentioned. And these were just released recently I think in March 2024, and these accounts were developed by the UKZN Centre for Water Resource Research based on the work that was done by the Water Research Commission. And the accounts provide us with the annual estimates of catchment water balances, the water inflows as well as outflows. And what is important about these accounts is the inclusion of the national land cover in the hydrological modeling. So the hydrological characteristics of the land cover, such as the agriculture, the built-up mines, are taken into account in how these accounts were compiled. And this helped us make the connection with what is happening in the landscape of the catchments and what it means for water over time and how it's used. Indicators were also extracted from the very detailed tables that came out of these accounts to summarize information. And because these are spatially explicit, we could also present the indicators on maps, as you can see at the bottom. And these could help us in identifying catchments where interventions are greatly needed. For instance, looking across the range of indicators in the Umgeni catchment, here at the bottom, we've got the reserved outflows, and this is as a fraction of total water resources, and this indicates catchments that are important to the supply of water downstreams, as you can see here at the bottom. And also a high value indicates that catchments that might be getting close to not meeting the demand. Per person, also one other indicator is the per capita net water resource. There is a higher net water resource in the upper parts of the catchment. And what you can see, so what all this information then ultimately then is useful for is towards ecological information, is towards informing the management plans in these catchments. And the lessons from these applications are yet to be captured, as these have recently been released. And the hydrological models which were used for these accounts was compiled only for the demonstration catchments within these 2 study areas. And the Water Research Council is supporting work towards developing the hydrological model at a national level. And such models and accounts could be particularly important in areas with limited capacity, hence providing essential information for catchment management as well as developing plans. And finally, we also did experimental ecosystem accounts in the same 2 demonstration catchments of the projects. And these accounts were for the rivers, riparian areas, as well as the wetlands. And this was towards testing the data availability as well as testing our methodology towards compiling these accounts. So the accounts that were compiled, it was the ecosystem extent and condition accounts, and these were compiled in biophysical terms. And what they show as a very simplified table of an extent accounting, this gives us a breakdown of the different types of ecological infrastructure as well as their conditions within the table. And it gives us the different condition categories that the EI assets are in. So the future direction of this work would be to add accounts for services that flow from these assets, but we did not do that within this project. And yeah, we did not do it. It was not within the framework of this project because it was more around testing. And piloting these accounts also told us a few things that we must just keep in mind. That the resolution and quality of data of our ecological infrastructure makes a huge difference to how much our EI we think we have. as well as what state our EI are in. So imagine on the left, the rivers in that 1 to 500,000 data sets, and on the right, those which are 1 into 50,000 data sets. And you can see how many more rivers there are when you look on your left, right. Okay. But basically, the point we're trying to make, we're demonstrating here, is based on the kind of data that you have, so junk in, junk out, so that the quality of the data will determine the quality of your accounts. And currently, towards improving this data set, Sambi's Freshwater Biodiversity Program is working with partners towards further refining these data sets. So the other things these pilots account told us is that rivers are largely modified. And whilst there are some improvements in river condition, but the overall trend shows that towards more degradation than anything else, and this you can see on the graph. So some of the key lessons and reflections from our accounts. So what have we learned from all this work that we've done? So in the investment and foundational data area, what we've seen and what also has come through from the various kind of presentations that have been done is foundational data is critical. So investing in our data set is very key. But what we need to reflect on also in South Africa is the privileged position that we sit in that allows us to be a lead in doing ecosystem accounts because of the quality of data that we have. And also just on the same note, investing in this data is required for us to be able to replicate these accounts. So the maintenance, the updating, as well as the serving of this data set is of key importance. And also, what we've also seen is we've also managed to demonstrate the feasibility of compiling these accounts. So we've seen that we can actually compile accounts. And in so doing, that required building on specialized kind of capacity, as my colleague already presented about our young people in NCA. That is the kind of capacity we were required to build in the past 7 years. And also what is also of key paramount is the specially explicit and time series data that is we actually need in order to compile these accounts. And in this space, it's more specific towards water resource management. And also what we've also managed to do is demonstrate that we can integrate socioeconomic information alongside with the ecological information and especially present this. And lastly is about process makes a difference. It is not all about the technical part. It is how we bring everybody into the space. It has been spoken about the partners which are in this room. So we've got our data providers, we've got our key role players who are the implementers, our policymakers, and also the compilers. So in order for the accounts to be taken up and be implemented, we need everybody in this room to take part and to be in this room so that there is the mainstreaming of accounts and they actually serve a purpose and they're being used. So as we have illustrated, the project focused in two critical catchments, which I've already mentioned, the Bergbrede and the Greater Umgeni. Excuse me. And the NCA work focused initially on the data refinement, which I've already demonstrated, and which we've shown that is a requirement. And as a key input into the accounts, this data has multiple purposes. So the investment into refining the data is not only for the NCA, but it's worthwhile for the various areas where the data can be used. Then put attention to piloting the range of accounts presented to you today. The information from accounts, along with the underlying data, have been shared with collaborative partners, and also it has been used in various knowledge platforms to actually be utilized. And in the catchments and in informing our EI management plans as well as our EI investment plans. So beyond the scope of the accounting work, but linking back to this work, it is the overall goal of the EI for Water project, which it is about the cost of restoration, how funds flow to invest in EI, and how to channel funds for most of the transformative impact in catchments gathered by the project. All of this information is useful towards a roadmap for mobilizing and guiding investment in the EI sector towards water security. And ultimately for unlocking, which I've already mentioned at the beginning, that is the aim, unlocking development finance. But that is for another presentation and a different expert to speak in that space. And that will be all from this presentation. And I will just leave you with a food for thought. How, as we sit here as a community of practice, can we support further investment in foundational national data sets to continue to provide evidence-based information towards guiding and planning and decision-making? And I'd also just like to thank everybody who's, I'm not going to name, but without the partnership in this room and beyond this room, we would not have done the work that we've done. And that will be all from me. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Tuli. Yeah, and so I wanted to make two comments. The one was just to note that a lot of the work that we've been able to build on inside this project, the groundwork was related on other initial projects that were funded, such as the Anchor Advancing Natural Capital Accounts project, as well as the NCA project, or Natural Capital Accounts and Valuation for Ecosystem Services, and how we were able to draw on that in the development of our Natural Capital Accounts body of work. But the other point I wanted to make was just to see, at the start of the project and at the start of this work, we were really struggling to see how all of these things are going to connect. And what Tuli just illustrated in that one of us, second, I think it was 2 slides back, around how the work that the accounts has done is really fed into all of the other parts of the project. So both the development of the ecological infrastructure, the consolidated map for water-related ecological infrastructure as a key foundational input into the accounts, but also into other plans and strategies that would be used around the management of ecological infrastructure in the catchments, and how that helps us link it back to making the case for investing in ecological infrastructure in terms of costing work, and then coming back to looking at what are the kind of options for resourcing the investment in ecological infrastructure. And so it starts from really good data foundations, so really emphasizing the point that Tuli made around investing in good foundational data, quite critical. Can I open it up for some questions for Tuli? I see 2 hands that went up there. I saw Louise and anybody this side? Okay, let's start with Prof and then the colleague just behind him.
Thank you very much. I'll try to not get into the details, but I'm wondering, very interesting works over time, especially in terms of accounting for the ecological infrastructure, as you said. If you recall, some years ago, we even tried SIP 19 or something like that, so I don't know how far this has gone. The question is, what is the cost of getting to this point from a projection perspective, particularly in terms of the fact that the Department of Water and Sanitation does quite a lot on the reserve determination and everything that they're supposed to be doing. But just an understanding of what are the cost implications of actually doing this, if we have those numbers, or if we could get them.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting. Brad Nelson here from the Endangered Wildlife Trust. I was really interested to see that you are taking into account both extent and condition. Could I ask just what criteria do you use for condition rating, and how did you assess that? I saw it was you said for wetlands, river and riparian zones. Did you also look beyond at the terrestrial areas surrounding those? Just be interested to know how you measure that.
Thanks, Tuli, for that presentation. I am wondering about the Lesotho. Most of if you look at the downstream dependence on the Lesotho highlands, are we not missing an important piece of the puzzle if we don't think about Lesotho for capital, for an account? And then the other opportunity, or the other thing that I'm grappling with, is this whole system approach, because we talk about the strategic water source areas, and if we address the challenges in strategic water source areas, protection, restoration, will we solve the water problem? No, because there's a link between the water source and the tap, and unless we integrate, and have we thought about an account for a whole system and integrate the grey and the green so that it speaks to that whole society, whole government approach. I think it will give us a much better picture, and I know it's a very big thing that I'm touching on. And then finally, who cares about this? We are the sector who care, who understand, but what's the messaging out there to the people that depend industries where we want to unlock the funding from? Unless we learn from Cape Town, unless people are really scared, they don't invest. Who can we scare about the water situation in the country that we can unlock sensible investment in long-term security in our water, in ecological infrastructure?
Sure. Ask Amy to add around some of the technical inputs as well. So you can start. All right, first.
Okay. Thank you everybody for those questions. Regarding costing, I think I'm gonna throw this to my boss. Jade.
So I'll add and Amy will add. So Prof, as I mentioned when I was framing it, that the work in our project is built on other initiatives, granted largely donor funded, but supported with through Stats SA and DFFE as well, and the Department of Water and Sanitation, and really building on some of the work that the department itself, the Department of Water and Sanitation, had done previously. And I think that it really gave us a foundation from which to work off. It does require warm bodies, and it does require dedicated warm bodies, and that's part of what both SG, the DG and the CE raised this morning around some of the constraints that we need to figure out between those three institutions. But it does require warm bodies, availability of data sets and good data sets, good foundational data is really important. So those are some of the initial things that I would put forward, and Amy can add from a technical perspective. And then I just wanted to tag on a little bit to what Louise asked around how do we think about the whole system of accounts. So and also around like who cares. What's been interesting in this last while, and we'll take a little bit of this into the conversation that's happening tomorrow morning around mainstreaming into the financial sector, because there's been a bit of alignment of the work around natural capital accounts and some of the work that we've done with AFD around nature-related risks and opportunities, which start to articulate very clearly where those risks are, but also where the opportunities are and where those dependencies for nature is. what we are also starting to see is that, and I look at a metro like Cape Town, and that has a lot to do with what the Nature Conservancy has done through the Water Fund, but starting to see the way they articulate the water value chain. I don't know if colleagues have seen the latest water outlook for sort of Cape Town, where they're showing alien invasive clearing is part of that pipeline. It's no longer just wastewater, stormwater, etc. But it's starting to articulate the catchment inside of that, which is already a massive move forward in terms of the thinking about and who cares about the investment in ecological infrastructure at that level. And I think our accounts and the foundational data that feeds into the accounts help us to better make the argument for that. But we're starting to see more and more case studies come up, particularly in the big metros where there's lots of dependencies. Thanks.
And just thinking back, so this project was designed 8-9 years ago, when natural capital accounting and the potential of it was really new. It was just an idea that we were trying to figure out how useful could this be. And if it weren't for the natural capital accounting element of the water security project, there wouldn't have been that work focusing on spatial data, on ecological infrastructure, and that has been so key to the project. And it's like what I said earlier around this, there's a really, really important feedback loop between the attention that accounts put to, right, what, can we use this? Is it good enough? What does it, have we sorted out our definitions, our classes, all that really detailed, take, go grey type of thing. But it's also where you start to clarify a whole lot, and I think this is where we're realizing how important this information is for things like understanding nature-related risks, dependencies, and so on. And it's the same data that I use for the National Biodiversity Assessment, for natural capital accounting, for nature-related risks, and it is so important that we have regular updates on this data. And if it's the attention that comes with accounts seems to say, is it spatially explicit enough? Are we clear enough on our definitions? Do we have a time series? And that's making a big difference. And I'm going to link now to the question about the ecosystem condition or ecological condition. We've made sure as SANBI that we are working with the same data that are informing the National Biodiversity Assessment. So the same approach to wetland condition assessments, it's the same data that we use into accounts. And that's so we work very closely with the Freshwater Biodiversity Program, which itself works very closely with a network of partners. So this river ecosystem condition information comes from the Department of Water and Sanitation. Riparian areas is an area of work that the department is working on as well, but so for there we used national land cover as a procedure right now. And I wanted to just say about the cost question and the cost question, that as you say, we need warm bodies, but we've been doing a lot of these for the first time. The Water Research Commission, they're on the stage, but all of the investment that they've done into the hydrological modelling that gets used, the water resource accounting methodology as well. If we were to sum up the cost right now, it would be huge. But that's also because we're figuring things out and we're doing a big investment now. And really the challenge is for us to figure out how do we do this more efficiently, more effectively, but still building internal capacity. We can't take years to produce all of these accounts over again, and that's why there's also been quite a lot of work looking into how can we become more efficient. That's for another presentation.
I don't know if you want to add something, Ames, to Louise's question around Lesotho, and she had a big question there.
Yes, let's do a project, please.
No, well, not no, but Lesotho is one of it's a country that's recently joined the African NCA community practice, and they've also got a project doing water accounts, and we've been saying since we found out last year, we met them last year, that it would be great to have bilateral connect the dots. There isn't yet that opportunity to do that. That's definitely.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Julie. Thanks for an inspiring talk. So we'll release you and we'll go to our next presentation, which will be given by Anisha Dairam from SANBI, who's looking at South Africa's role in the Global Ecosystems Atlas project. Thanks.
To go shorter. Does it come up? So I just go to the next slide. In the meantime, so I'm Anisha. I work. Ooh, are you okay?
Sorry, yes,
Clearly, I scare people, but I also work at the South African National Biodiversity Institute, and there I curate the national vegetation map, or also the terrestrial map in South Africa. And I think Jennifer and Tuli set the stage really nicely for the importance of foundational data sets. So the terrestrial map is one of our foundational data sets in a family of maps that we create at SANBI with, as everyone here works, with many, many partners. So South Africa has been playing a role in something called the Global Ecosystem Typology and the Global Ecosystem Atlas projects, which are related. They are global projects, but again, their foundational rests in our foundational ecosystem maps and classification systems. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we've been doing in that space. So South Africa has a long history of ecosystem mapping in all our realms. When I say realms, I mean marine, terrestrial, freshwater, and estuarine. So because of the way, and Tuli said this again, because of the way our ecosystem maps and classification systems at a foundational level is set up, it has really meant that they provide really good spaces to be taken up as pilots, even in the global space. So locally and internationally, we use these ecosystem maps for red list assessments, ecosystem accounting, and several other places, including education and private sector at the ground level. But what we're interested in today is the ecosystem accounting side. And so over the past few years, we've been consolidating our ecosystem maps into something that we call the integrated ecosystem map, which basically brings all our realm foundational maps together into one space. And that gets combined with the national land cover, like Tuli said, to do things like the red list assessments of ecosystems. And that uses a global system from the IUCN, like you get for species. They have the same system for ecosystems. And that similar information gets used for ecosystem accounting. But at its base are these ecosystem maps and classification systems. And just a few years ago, we released the South African National Ecosystem Classification System Handbook, or SANEC. And what that basically does is it outlines how our maps come together. You'll see, you can't see all the levels, but each of those rows is a hierarchical level in a classification system. And this matters because the global ecosystem typology, which is developed by the IUCN, also has a hierarchical structure. And so you can see the similarities between the way our classification systems are set up. It can then nest into these global systems. So you don't have to worry about the details, but the global ecosystem typology is one of the many different classification systems around the world that tries to summarize all of the world's ecosystems into something that can be compared across the world. And our systems, our ecosystems, nest up into these ecosystem functional groups, which is the level 3 that you see up there. So that's something that they've been trying to do, the IUCN team has been trying to do, but what's very important is that all of these functional groups don't replace the national level ecosystem types. And so that's something that's very important. We aggregate up into their system. So what we did is around the early 2000s, the IUCN team was busy refining their typology and thinking through the concepts. And they asked South Africa, because our data was sort of ready to be put up in and tested in the system, to be one of the few pilot countries, to see whether we could take our, we started with terrestrial, our 400 odd ecosystem types, and nest them into those level 3 groups. We also did it with marine and estuarine. Interestingly, in an ecological infrastructure for water security session, we couldn't do it with the freshwater because their typology didn't match the way our ecosystem types are set up. But it's because of we were early in the conversation, that conversation to try and refine the IUCN system with ours is still ongoing, which I think is good that it's not a top-down approach that they're using. So we did get, they call it a crosswalk at Sandby. We nested our ecosystems and crosswalked them with the IUCN's ecosystem types. And we had a first pass. So what we're doing at the moment is we're taking these, so these are the groups, they set into codes. We're going to our experts around the country, to each biome, and we're asking them to help us refine the way we've put these, the groups that we've put into our classifications into the IUCN classification. So that's something that's ongoing. But because South Africa was involved at the early stages of this process of the IUCN, it meant that we're in a position where we can also help with the guidelines. And so just a month ago, the IUCN released this publication, which is meant to help guide other countries wanting to do the same process to crosswalk their types to the global system. And what you'll find is that we have several South African authors, co-authors that were on that paper, which I think is quite a big deal. And some of them are at Sandby and some of them are at other institutions. So this IUCN GET stuff, why does it matter? Because it gets used in global assessments. But one of the big things that we have to, that we find is that many of you will know that we don't have global ecosystem maps for many countries around the world, many in Africa. And so there's this huge need for some sort of platform or stage. There are sometimes old maps, but people don't know where to find them. So that's where this Global Ecosystems Atlas project comes in. The group, the GEO group, is undergoing an effort to try and get all the ecosystem maps from around the world and their classification systems and put them onto one platform. And the idea is that if anybody wants to do any sort of analysis, they go there and it tells them that there's an ecosystem map for this country. And what's really important is that the global ecosystem map doesn't replace, again, the in-country maps. The data points back to the country where the data lives, and to where you can then get more information, including a description of the types. So what's important about the atlas as well is that the way they display it is it uses the nested up version of the global ecosystem typology. So I know it's confusing, I also get confused. The typology is the IUCN typology that classifies. The atlas is the maps and the classification systems and the platform that they're going to use to display this data. But there's a lot that goes into it. So the thinking at the moment is they are busy with a pilot that they're going to showcase at COP16. And they would love to do the historical as well eventually, but for the moment they're focusing on what the ecosystems look like now. So South Africa, it was quite uncomfortable because our group always pushes for the foundational data to show the historical extent, because we work with the baseline of what for ecosystem accounting is what used to be there, so the starting point of our ecosystems. But what we had to do with for the Global Ecosystem Atlas project is we still started with our foundational data, but we used the national land cover in a slightly different way. The IUCN has natural classes, which was easy to crosswalk our foundational data, but they also have anthropogenic classes. So croplands is an ecosystem type. And so we reclassified our national land cover into those anthropogenic classes. And then we combined the map again to get this global ecosystem atlas, a contemporary extent of what the ecosystems look like and their extents. So we've sent that to the GEO team, and South Africa is going to be one of the countries that they will showcase as one of their in their pilot at COP16. So how exciting is that? So the broader idea with this Global Ecosystem Atlas project is, at the moment, you can see there's a short list of countries that already have maps of ecosystem types, including South Africa, but also Mozambique, who we've been working quite closely with. But they also have other countries that are partway towards developing an ecosystem map, and then other countries like Namibia that don't yet have a map of ecosystem types. The idea then is to help these countries to co-develop those maps of ecosystem types. One of the ways that South Africa is facilitating this is through something called the SBAP. I'm not going to read the whole name. It's basically a regional project between South Africa, Namibia, Malawi, and Mozambique. And we're all trying to capacitate each other by sharing our knowledge and trying to make sure that each of our countries has a map of ecosystem types. And then some countries that already have a map of ecosystem types, we want to try and explore condition maps or red list of ecosystem assessments for those countries. And so Namibia, as part of SBAP, we are all trying to develop a map of ecosystem types for them. And why does this matter for ecosystem accounting? Is that then Namibia will also be able to do things like crosswalk into the GET, but importantly, they will be able to have a map, that foundational data that is essential for ecosystem accounting processes. So the whole point of the Global Ecosystem Atlas project is to try and bring countries and the expertise together so that we can all form this global network and support system so that everyone can be on the same page and get those foundational maps. So I stole some slides from Mandy Driver, so just acknowledging her, but thanks to all of you for listening. Just to say that South Africa is very involved in this work. We're not the experts, we don't have all the answers, but we are able to contribute and then also help our partner countries. I'm just a small piece of a very large puzzle, so I'll try and answer as many of your questions as I can. But if I'm not able to, I'll then send you to Mandy or Andrew. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Anisha. I'm going to open the floor for any questions. If there are no questions, maybe just a note that don't run away. Maybe just a note. I think what Anisha touched on just now in terms of that regional project, I don't know if colleagues recall this morning, CE spoke about, I think Amy also touched on it, on this sub-regional center that Sandy has been nominated to lead. And this kind of cooperation and sharing amongst the different countries in the region is really important to share expertise and share knowledge around processes so that the cost investment is less for other countries because they don't have to try and reinvent the wheel, etc. But I think it's quite an important aspect of this work. And even though you are a part of it, don't minimize it. You play a very big role in that. Thanks, Anisha. All right, our next speaker is going to take us through the South African National Land Cover data and its operational use. So please welcome Zakaria Omar from DFFE.
Afternoon to all. Today I'm going to be talking to you about the South African National Land Cover, data and its operational use. Some of you may be aware that the land cover was released in the 23rd, 24th of May, just a few months old. So purpose of my discussion is just to brief you all on the release of the 2022 National Land Cover and give a technical overview on the land cover dataset, the land cover change datasets, and how we use the data. So this is your 2022 South African National Land Cover dataset. That's what it currently looks like. It was generated from Sentinel-2 satellite imagery, or multispectral imagery, which is 20 meters. And it was generated in-house at the DFFE office using a system known as a computer automated land cover, also known as calc. So how the calc works is it uses your raw imagery. So calc is a cloud-based system, and it uses cloud modeling approaches. The first approach that we use is we take imagery from the 1st of January 2022 till the 31st of December 2022. So we use a full calendar years of imagery, and then it does something called spectral modeling using the satellite imagery. It models your base foundation classes, which is your water, bare ground, vegetation, and woody cover. So once we have the 4 classes of information from your satellite imagery, we use something called geographic masks. So geographic masks are your urban mask, your plantation, your field crop boundaries, your water masks. So we take these masks, and these masks refine those foundational base classes. So your water mask will contain your rivers, your estuaries, your dams, and we use this to subdivide the foundation classes. Similarly, we have a plantation mask, which will divide your base class into planted, into clear felt, and so on. And that's how we get 73 classes of information. Alone spectrally, you're not, with the satellite imagery, you're not able to get 73 classes of information. So what's part of the land cover dataset? So you can see it's quite a bit of classes that are mapped. It's a huge inventory. We've got your forest classes, your dense, your contiguous low forest. You've got your rivers, your dams, your mining, your mangroves, cultivation classes, which we provide from the Department of Agriculture, your orchards, your residential areas, urban areas, and your mining. So it's based on the gazetted South African Spatial Data Infrastructure Act classes, and these are the 73 classes that are included. So if we look at some snippets of the data, on your right is a picture of the raw Sentinel-2 imagery, and on the left you will see how the land cover classified the data. So you can see your estuary that's well digitized. You can see your surrounding ecosystems. The light blue color on the top is your wetlands. The pinkish color is your pineapple plantations. You can also see next to the estuary, the dark green, your indigenous forests, and your commercial forest plantations have also been well picked up from the land cover data set. This is Cape Town urban areas. You can see the surrounding, the yellow depicts all your residential areas. The darkish green, or in the center they're like mustard, that's your industrial areas, and your field crop boundaries. So you can see the detail in which the land cover maps it at a 20-meter resolution. This is Limpopo agricultural areas, and you can see your center pivots and your agricultural fields that have been picked up by the Sentinel data. Then we talk in the legend. If you download the dataset and you open your attribute table, you will see that there's 73 classes of information, and it's a hierarchical structure based on the STI Act number 54 of 2003, and you will see that they're made up of 3 classes of information. Your first one is your level 1 classification, and these are your broad land cover classes, and it includes your forest land, your shrubland, your grassland, your water bodies. In total, I think there are 10 classes. And then we have your level 2, which is your breaks down your level. It further subdivides your level 1 into more refined classes. You will have your natural wooded land, your planted forest. Your shrubland is being broken down into kudu and fynbos. Your grassland into a natural grassland. Then you have your water bodies, which have been separated into natural water bodies and artificial water bodies, and then so on. And then we come to the final 73 classes, which includes all 73 classes of information. This is your original data set that has been mapped. If we had to symbolize the data, you are able to symbolize on your level 1. So we provide the color schemes with you. You can have your 10 classes of information as shown to the extreme left, all your level 1, your level 2, 23 classes of information, and your full 73 classes of information. So it depends how you would like to display the data, how would you like to use the data. You symbolize according to your needs. The overall accuracy of the data set is 84.22%. The land cover data set was verified using a series of 7,498 points across the country. We tried to get most of information from each class, and if you look at our inter-class accuracy, most of the classes are 80% and above, and each of these points were verified from high resolution data and your Sentinel data, and we're very confident in the land cover data set. But with every data set there are some limitations, and we do note that in certain classes, like your vegetation classes, they don't have hard boundaries in the landscape, so it's very hard to depict. But we can stand by all our water classes and the anthropogenic classes, which are fairly accurate. Just going to speak a bit on the change data sets. So when we release the 73 class data set, we also release a change data set. The change data set takes your 73 classes and it amalgamates them into 20 classes. These are your 20 classes of information that we use to assess change. In the brackets, they show you the number of classes which were used to amalgamate each of these classes. So you can see for barren land, you've got 25, 26, 28, 29, 30. So those are the classes that were from the 73 that have been amalgamated into a barren land class. So when you download the data, you will see something called a change code matrix. So with with a 20 class change assessment legend, there are 4 possible class to class changes. So each of these classes can change to another class, and they are depicted by these 400 change outcomes. So when you download the dataset, you are able to identify change for a specific class. So on the screen, you can see at the bottom, the light blue there is just showing you mining change. So if you had to select all the values at the last in the last column, it will show you all your mining areas in your new year of land cover assessment. On the column, on the vertical column there, on the pink, if you select all those values on your data set, you would be able to see all the mines in the old year of assessment. The yellow color at the bottom shows where this mining area has not changed. So using this data set, you are able to look at any class change and depict where these changes have occurred in the landscape. When we release the data set, we also do the change analysis for you. So you would get your change data set, then you would also get a change matrix. So the change matrix shows you the first 2 legends are your 20 aggregated land cover land use classes. The figures in the matrix represent the hectares of a particular land cover class that have changed in that specific year. The row total provides, in this example, we're looking at 2020, 1990. So if you total the row column, it will give you the total hectares of that land cover class in 2020. The column total provides the older year of assessment. In this example, it's 1990, so it gives you the total hectares of the column land cover class. So if you read the change matrix, this example tells you 2,245 hectares of indigenous forest was converted to cultivated subsistence from 1990 to 2020. And then the yellow intercept shows you your unchanged areas. So when the land cover data set is released and the change data set is done, all this change analysis is done nationally and is done provincially. So you can, when you download a specific year of change assessment, you can have access to your national change statistics. You don't have to do the analysis. It's all reported in hectares and it's done. And we also have provincial statistics. The one that's shown on here is your Western Cape statistics. So you can use it. You can sum up your rows and columns, and you can have an idea of what the land cover looked like between those periods of change assessment. Now, using these land cover data sets, because we have frequent updates, we are able to build a time series of change. So from the new 2022 land cover data set, we did change assessment from 1990 to 2022, 2014, 2022, 2018, 2022, and 2020, 2022. So all these data sets are available for download on our website. And we also redone the previous land cover change assessments because we picked up a slight boundary error on the previous land cover which used the older boundary for Gauteng. So that boundary has been corrected and the change assessments have been done. So the access platforms for these datasets are on the Aegis website. If you log on to the website, you can register as a user. You're able to download your Albers dataset, which is in meters. It's a projected dataset. You'll get a geographic dataset, which is in its original format. And then what comes with it is an accuracy assessment report that tells you a bit about the land cover, what assessment was done, and gives you accuracy statistics. And then we also give you color palettes, to display your level 1 and your level 2, and a detailed report is provided on the land cover dataset. When you download your change dataset, you would get, depending which period of assessment you want to assess change on, the ones highlighted in red is all the new change assessments that have been done. You would get a change assessment report. You would also get a change assessment dataset, and then you will get a change assessment table that does all the national and provincial change statistics. Now I'm just going to touch a little on how we use the data within the department operationally. So the department manages the protected areas register in terms of NEMBA, Protected Areas Act 57 of 2003. One of the requirements is that we have to monitor our private nature reserves in the norms and standard. A remote sensing study should be done to see what happens within our protected areas. So we use the land cover data set to assess what goes on within our protected areas. Previously, people used to go out in field visits to assess what's happening on ground, and sometimes it's spatially restrictive. You're not allowed to enter these private reserves. But using the land cover data set, we are able to screen our private nature reserves and other protected areas. We're able to see where the transformation of land has occurred within these protected areas. And this is an example of how the land cover is used operationally for compliance and enforcement monitoring. We also use the land cover to map our carbon stocks and fluxes. We build a time series of carbon change over time. The table here shows you the mean reduction in soil organic carbon for the country due to the cultivation of crumbling soils. Using this data set, we are able to identify better mitigation measures such as conservation agriculture, and build a time series of and see how land use practices have impacted on soil organic carbon. We also use the land cover data set for the RED Plus programs. We use the woody cover and the vegetation classes to identify hotspots where mitigation actions must take place. Our erosion classes, we also track erosion using your eroded lands classes, especially in your grasslands, your woodlands and thickets. So the land cover forms a foundational data set to assess erosion change within the country, and then we hone in on certain hotspots. We have queries, clearing of vegetation. The land cover forms a foundational data set to assess all of this. This was an example done in Ndumu Game Reserve where we assessed change from 1990 to 2020. So using the land cover data set, this is what the land cover classes were in 2020. And then if you assess 1990, you can see there's a rapid change. You can see there's a huge increase in natural wooded land, even though it's a small, big increase but small area. We can see a lot of woodification in the data set. There's been a decrease in our wetlands. So using this land cover change data set, we are able to assess the situation within the landscape, within the reserves, and then better guide us on decisions. This example was using the 2022 and 1990 land cover change data set. We did a pilot study for Gauteng to pick up change over a 32-year period. We can see there's a decrease in mining, huge increase in barren land, but that's a very small area. You can see a natural wooded land increase. Your built up industrial areas had a huge increase. Your built up commercial areas also took an increase. So using these data sets for our environmental planning, the land cover data set forms a foundational data set. You can see exactly where these changes are happening. Use your high resolution data to support your investigation, and build your time series of what has happened over time. So in conclusion, the department now has the ability to generate the national land cover data set on a regular basis via the calc system. We are able to undertake biennial land cover change assessments and geostatistical reporting. And we have a time series of environmental change from the baseline in 1990 and into the future. And the plan is every 2 years to do a land cover. And then we're going to just see, is it feasible to do it every 2 years, or should we maybe increase it to 3 to 5 years if there's not significant change? And then by having a synoptic view of our resources, we are able to quickly assess, monitor change, and make informed decisions. Thank you.
Thanks, Zach. Any questions for Zach? There's one that side. Any other questions from this side? Any questions from this side? Ntando. Okay, so we'll start with Pavuyo and then Ntando.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I just wanted to ask with regards to the change matrices, right, and the changes. Obviously, with any data set, there's going to be some errors here and there. You can get away with a few here and there. But the more stark one is like when something transformed or built goes back to natural vegetation, things like that. It's very difficult to get away or explain that kind of thing. Was there any special kind of attention or in the new system that was done to avoid that kind of change where something was built in the previous one and all of a sudden it's a forest or it's natural or something like that?
Okay, let's take Ntando also.
Okay, thanks Dr. Omar for the presentation. Just a quick one. I wanted to check for coastal forests, would that the land cover types classify that as indigenous forests? And also secondly, I wanted to check, does these data sets intersect in any way with the information in your EIA screening tool, just to check and track the impacts of developments across the country in terms of tracking change in land cover and land use? Thanks.
Okay, so I think the coastal forest one, we use a Sanby boundary. It is included in your indigenous forest class. And using the data screening tool, the land cover data set is not used specifically in the screening tool. What's used in the screening tool is all the data that we get from our custodians. So the screening tool is based on theme data. It's more high resolution compared to the land cover. The land cover is a 20-meter scale, so we get an agricultural data set from agriculture that shows your land capability, your field crop boundaries. Some of the data sets are included in the land cover, burnt into the land cover, but not specifically in the screening tool. So your Sandy terrestrial theme will be your CBAs, your strategic water source areas. So more finer data is used in the screening tool compared to the land cover. So we don't use it specifically in the land cover. And then I think your coastal forest one is covered under your indigenous forest. And then your question is a very valid one. So what you can do in that case is over the years, since when the land cover is done, it maps your 73 classes of information. Then when you do a change, it maps that change at that point in time. Then after a few years, that area has been rehabilitated. So then when the land cover has been mapped again, that has been shown, if our masks are accurate and everything is picked up correctly, that's been shown as a new class. But then to go back and see that, you know what, it's not a natural change or man-made change, what we advise you to do is to take your original land cover back to your natural classes, your 4 base classes. You can recondition the normal classes to your 4 base classes again. I think previously a presentation was done by Mark on how that was done, where you take it back to your 4 original classes, and over a time period you can see, has this been natural or was this changed? So you're going to have to do it out of your land cover change assessment, because what it's going to do is, if it's changed, it's going to pick up that change from here to now. It was natural, now it's changed, it's transformed. So you're going to have to do it outside your land cover. But at that point in time, it should have the most accurate data for that year.
Any other questions? Mark.
Go for it, Mark. Maybe give him a mic.